Right guys, well I hope you can see. Now in the previous episode I said I'd go through what the difference is between Electrofrog points and non-Electrofrog points. And today, as I'm not doing anything, there's no better opportunity than to do that. So this is your standard point. This is a non-Electrofrog point. So we have, this one is made by Pico, made in England. So we'll come back to the back of it in a second. So simple, as you may know, you have your two rails, and on a layout you'll be putting a positive through one, negative through the other. So on here, if you was powering it from this side, you'd have positive, negative, let's say, for argument's sake. So on this one, which is a insulated point, you will see, if I just bring it up, the frog part of it is made from plastic, so it's non-conductive. So when the train wheels go over here, they lose power. So your shorter locos, if you've only got one wheel that's actually picking up electricity very well, may stall. That's the part of insulated points. The other part of insulated points is when the point blades are switched. So at the moment this is in a closed position. This frog blade, switchblade, has a little, I can't move it out because it's got, what's it, but just in there, I don't know if you'll be able to see that, is a little metal tab. Both blades have that little metal tab that goes underneath the rail and helps conduct the electricity onto the blades. So in this case, while this point is closed, this rail here is live, and as we were saying, this one is your negative, so that is a negative rail, while this one remains positive. So this blade, if you're feeding it from this side, this blade is positive, this remains your negative, because this is the shared rail from these two. So the way the insulated ones work is they have on the bottom of them a little bit of metal work. So this takes the feed from, this is the rail that we was on about, the straight rail, takes the rail feed from there. Let me try and bring it closer. Takes the rail feed from there, deposits it there on the opposite rail, and the same for the diverging over to that rail. So if we take a multimeter, so it will beep if there's a signal. You will see that this rail is connected to that rail, and that rail is connected to that rail. However, these two rails aren't connected, and neither are that part. They're just there for reinforcements and to help guide the wheels. When the point is switched, this rail will touch that rail and help energize that up if you've got an isolator there. Because back in the day of DC layouts, you'd isolate points at the ends, so you could then run multiple locomotives at once. So you had essentially block sections where you would turn the power on and off depending on which controller you wanted to use. So we'll now flip over to an Electrofrog point and I'll explain the differences there. So what you have now in vision is, in the front of the camera you have an insulated point, and at the back of the camera here, this is an Electrofrog point. Now the wiring with an Electrofrog point gets a little bit difficult. So the principle of how the point works is the same. The blades transfer power, la la la. However, an Electrofrog point, you'll notice the main difference straight away is this frog here. There is no plastic on this frog here to separate it like there is on this one here. So on this point, that rail and that rail are separated, so they can carry the opposite currents no problem. However, these two rails on this point are connected, and I can show that meter's still in continuity. Do that, it beeps. That one to there. Sorry, tell a lie. So you have so this frog, no matter what you have that set to, the frog, the whole switch assembler is live to whatever the frog is doing. So if you've got, so in this case here, I'm going to keep using that to point, you know, maybe this screwdriver. So if this rail was your positive and this is your negative, when your positive runs across here, it livens this frog to be positive. However, this rail is still negative, so you have to add an isolation in there and there, because this rail and this rail always stay the same, but the frog has to change. So then in its straight position, so that position, this frog now becomes negative. However, this rail, if you didn't have the isolation in, is positive, so you'd short out because of that there. Now there's ways around it. The easiest way around it is what we've got and are slowly doing, which is you can get either Electrofrog point motors, or you can get a controller for DCC points which can handle a normal motor, point motor, but will do the frog part of it remotely. So this is a Gauge Master motor. So you can run these without the Electrofrog or with, and this is what I like about these motors. They can be a bit more temperamental, they are a bit more of a pain in the arse to wire, but overall they are very flexible compared to your Pico point motors. But this is a Pico point motor where you only have your 2 coil contacts and 1 common coil contact. So they only take 3 wires. These will take 6. So what you have here is your A and B, which are your 2 coils. C, which is your common for your coils. So if you was wiring it up to a non-Electrofrog point, you'd only need A, B and C. Simple as. However, you then also have 2 wires in the middle, which is E and D, which go to your track power. So these take your rail power. So you'd put these up onto the circuit, 1 positive, 1 negative, depending on your layout and how you've got it wired. This wire then, the 3rd wire to this sequence, which is F, I believe, is your Electrofrog point. So this goes to the frog on your Electrofrog. So you'd solder that into like there, so to speak. So that in here you will see, I hope, if it can focus. It's a bit small for it to focus. But in there is a little spring and a gold disc. So each side of the run you will see a metal contact strip. There's one there and there's one on the other side. So one of them strips goes to wire F to your frog. The other one is put into two with a gap big enough, which goes to your track power. So that when you switch your point, whichever side you've got it to becomes electrified to that rail. So in this case now, with the point motor in this position, this red wire is through to the frog. If I switch it over, it now disconnects that rail and puts the black into the Electrofrog. So that's basically how it works. Electrofrogs are very good for locos if you want to move them slowly. They're very good at not stalling, but the Electrofrog does all depend on how well. So the Electrofrog depends on how well you've wired it, basically. How well you've soldered it to the track. Your electrical connections, everything like that. Where your typical insulated point can be fed from fish plates. So it does all depend on what you actually want and need from your layout. If you're doing a very small shunting layout with like class 08 shunters, you might want to go the Electrofrog point, because their contacts is a very small area, which then can come off the electricity very easily, especially when going over points. Where the Electrofrog, because the whole system is at a voltage and is live, there's no gap for the engine to have to get over to reach the electricity again. So that's where they're good. On a main line, so if you're running trains quite quickly up and down, insulated points are perfectly fine. Getting into the industry, well, I say industry, getting into the hobby, insulated points, they're not really a problem. They're nice and simple, where Electrofrog points you have to have some understanding of how they work, how to wire them, etc. So in like our case here, where we're having to repair the layout and the electrics for the layout, it's becoming a bit of a pain in the backside, because like the double slip that we've got, even though it's wired up, it trips the controller every single time it's flipped, because something's not quite right there. I do now actually have my meter, so I can actually try and pin it out and work it out. But yeah, so if you're starting from scratch, you plan on putting point motors in, Electrofrog points, perfectly fine. If you're repairing a layout, Electrofrog points can be a pain in the jacksy, especially if wires have been cut and you've got no diagrams and nothing's colour coordinated. But as I say, it all depends on your personal preference. I do hope that you found this video useful. If you've got any questions, do stick them in the comments below. If you've got any video suggestions or any topics you'd like me to touch on, drop them in the comments below as well.
Manka was a ghost miniature, down in scale, little trains, lots of fun.